boom, we are all live in here.
Yay!
Yay!
The big day has arrived.
All right.
Excited.
Richard, good to see you made it in here. Hey, Paul.
Oh, it's a happy birthday card. Very good. I didn't see that one coming.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome. We are waiting for more folks to join in the interim.
But
It's
one more time.
Agile's birthday. Let's get into the mood.
Lisa, so glad you joined us.
How was that?
Oh, those crackers.
Very
For
cool.
the Chinese New Year. Firecrackers for the Chinese New Year.
Good
All
morning,
right, so how are we
everybody.
doing? Nash, how are we doing? Tell me about how many people we have on board. We should.
Yeah, we have close to 59 people on board right now, looking our live stream as of, oh, now we have 61. Perfect. This is still climbing.
Okay, it's climbing. So let's get on with the groove once more. This song doesn't get old because today is the 20th birthday of the Agile Manifesto, and we're going to be celebrating all day. We have the Mighty 12, the organizers, all here behind the scenes, all with funny hats and everything. We are ready to party, and we are going to, celebrate the whole day. And, what better to start the day than with a co-author of the manifesto, Alistair. So let's once more time, happy birthday. All right. That got me all energized. Nash, the man behind the whole technology and everything here, how is it looking? Are we ready to go?
So,
And,
yeah,
ready
I think
to kick it off?
We should definitely get started. The count right now is 67, including 12 of us and Alistair. So looks like we are ready to roll.
Okay, so let's do this. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining and being part of 820 Agile Conference. Today is the big day. Today is the day the manifesto was signed, and we have great presentations, great fun stuff throughout the day. So, quick introduction and talk about some of the things that we're going to be doing today. Quick introduction, and I'll talk about the sponsors, the platforms, some of the cool stuff. Let's get to it. So, first of all, I want to thank all our wonderful sponsors. This event wouldn't have been possible without the help of our sponsors. As you are aware, such a big conference with so many speakers, we were able to give this free of cost to our Agile community only because all our costs were covered by our sponsors. So many people think, hey, it's a virtual conference, what cost do you have? So, a lot of expenses related to the platform and technology and everything else. So it all adds up. So we do want to thank our sponsors. Our platinum sponsor, I want to mention, is Deloitte. Our gold sponsor, Anika Systems, and Ventera, our silver sponsor. We also have our bronze sponsors, Lightspeed, Orca Intelligence, Ecom Consulting, Coach to Agilius, REI Systems, and IC Agile. And we also have our marketing partners. These are two organizations that are that really helped us through advertising, and this is a good relationship that we have with Agile Alliance. And I do want to give a shout out to them for supporting all local meetups and communities. And just a quick reminder, 820 is powered by volunteers, and all of us are part of Agile meetups. And these meetups are part of Agile Alliance's community program. So big shout out to them. And Agile 20 Reflect Festival. This is happening throughout the month, global festival, tons of amazing stuff. So even after today, please do go to all the other events that is part of Agile 20 Reflect Festival. With that, I think this is something that we definitely pay a lot of attention to. We are all here to have fun, to learn from each other, but it's important to follow, our code of conduct. All we're asking is, behave professionally, do things that you would do at your office space, don't do things that you would not do at your workplace. Simple things: be respectful, be kind, be courteous, be inclusive, be professional, and most important, be agile and have tons of fun. If you want to read all the material that we have for the code of conduct, it's available on our website. Now, for today and for the last 2 days, we've been using Hua. This is our platform. Very, very intuitive. The great thing about it is that you could use it from your laptop, or you could also use it from your phone, from your smartphone. This gives you the ability to look at the calendar of events, select it, add it to your calendar, and it has a lot of fun stuff where you can engage with the community. So definitely check it out. Go to the community tab from the left menu. There's a bunch of amazing stuff that people have put in, attendees have put in. There are questions, there are meetups. There is a space where you can ask organizers if you have any questions, and a lot of stuff. So please engage. This is the opportunity to meet new people, get to know them. And the good thing is that Hua and this app is going to be live for 1 more year for us. So even after the conference, you will be able to connect with others, ask questions to the speakers, and so many other great things. With that, let's move on to some fun stuff. So who wants to win a $25 Uber Eats card? All you need to do to win or to qualify to win is pay attention during the keynote, go to the community section, and then add what you learned from keynote. And you could win $25. The only catch is it needs to be used before 15th of February. So the whole idea is that you could use it to, get a meal during the conference, and you have till the 15th to use it. So please take advantage of that. Whatever you learn, take notes and put it there. We have a live raffle happening today. So we have a bunch of books which are signed by the authors, and those books will be shipped directly to the winners. The only catch is we will cover costs for domestic shipping only, and it'll be shipped directly by the author. So very nice of them to give those books to us. We also have two of our sponsors, Coach to Reach and Lightspeed, and they have given training vouchers. So take advantage of that, learn new things. And we also have a customizable snack box from Snack Magic. How fun. So you can custom create your own basket of snacks. So those are raffles. It's going to happen today at 4 o'clock, and I will be the host for that. I look forward to seeing you there. All right, so let's talk about our organizers. This is my family. This is the team that has worked extremely hard to bring this conference to make it a reality. Way back when, I think in September, when we started talking about it, it really was just a couple of thoughts. But the energy, the dedication, the passion that this team has put together, this is what has made this event possible. And we're all here today because of these. I'm blessed to be part of this team, and hats off to the dedication. Thank you so much, guys. Talking about speakers, we never actually thought that we could have these many amazing speakers. We have 27 presenters. That's right, 27 presenters. And 4 keynotes, 5 panelists, and 18 speakers. I do want to highlight that all of our speakers are local from the DMV area. And the reason we did that, because we want them to share stories of their yesterday, their today, and their tomorrow. How has agility changed them? How is agility changing our today? And what is there in future? Let's together imagine what our future is and start working towards that. That's the idea here. So all local speakers. With that, I would like to invite my co-chair, Steve, to come and share a few words about the next slide. Steve, are you ready?
I am ready, and I'm just going to call out, because we're short on time, and I know everybody wants to get going at 10 o'clock. I'm going to skip the next few slides and just mention that, please, not everybody could speak, because we have so many wonderful people in the DMV area that wanted to participate. So what we did, instead of having lightning talks, we had people pre-record lightning talks, and it is absolutely wonderful. We have a couple of dozen lightning talks on our website, a20dmv.org. So please, if you have 5 or 10 minutes and you want to learn, you want to embrace some new knowledge, go to the webpage, click on lightning talks, and learn. You can do everything from learning about leadership, new ideas on design, UX, and even some meditation, and hopefully some laughing yoga will be there too. So Toby, with that, I'm just going to hand it right back to you, and so we can go ahead and get started at 10. Just keep going.
All right.
Thank you.
That sounds good. All right, so real quick. So all we ask from all of you in the next, well, this was 3 days ago, for the whole 3 days, is really to be engaged, be part of this wonderful journey, and continue these conversations even after the event is over. The app is going to be there. You can reach out to the organizers. We're happy to connect with you. Let's together evolve agility across the globe, and definitely in the DMV as well. So today's program, let's talk about this real quick. We're going to kick it off in a minute with Alistair. He is the co-author of the Agile Manifesto, and what better than today? Today is the day the manifesto was signed. And we are so lucky because we got to get Alistair to come, and I think in September he said yes, he agreed, and he said that so many people reached out to him after that. So we're lucky that we got him, in our first call. So he's going to talk about the Genesis, the creation, magic, and more, and share a lot of anecdotes and personal stories that we probably have never heard. So that's going to be amazing. Next, we're going to have Rocio Briseno, who's going to talk about the social impact, how Agile has impacted in different areas. Then we have Jim York, right here from the DMV area. He's going to talk about an increment is born, how that happens. And then we have Matthias Effert. He's going to talk about emergence. So that's the plan for this morning. During lunch, we have some fun stuff, laughing yoga, history of Agile DMV, and Agile Manifesto impact discussion. And then in the afternoon, we're going to kick it off with none other than Linda Rising. And she's going to talk about the power of an Agile mindset, followed by 3 amazing presentations. And then now we are ready for the keynote. So ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Alistair Cockburn, the co-author of the Agile Manifesto. He is going to share with us personal anecdotes, personal stories, his reflections of how everything happened in those magical 3 days in Utah. He's also going to walk through the last 20 years, what he has seen, what he has learned, and he's going to share with us what his thoughts are of what agility has in store for us in future. With that, Alistair, welcome.
Thank you very much. And am I going to be a disembodied voice? Oh, I might be a disembodied voice, but before we put me on the screen, I want to say about this plaque, which is very recent, like a day or 2 old. Scrum Alliance organized a session at Snowbird in the very room that we wrote the manifesto, and the people at Snowbird with the Scrum Alliance created this plaque, and they're going to hang this plaque in the room at Snowbird. So what's happened is over the last 20 years, so many people have gone to Snowbird and asked the people at the front desk at the lodge at Snowbird, hey, can I see the room where they did the Agile Manifesto? And the people at the front desk, of course, they don't have any idea what this is. So now there's going to be a plaque in the Aspen room. And I took this picture of the plaque when they were presenting it. And what I like the best about this plaque, and it's going to be a theme in everything that I talk about. So I'll talk about my journey and my understanding over the 10 years that preceded the writing of the manifesto. But the thing I always like to highlight is there were 17 people in the room, and each of those 17 people had a deep personal history. Each person was a senior developer, consultant, manager, whatever they were. And although we had some people from extreme programming and some from Scrum and DSDM and FTD and thing, the writing of the manifesto was a piece of magic that happened literally with 17 people. And what we love is the fact that nobody says this person did this or this person did that. It was such a blend of conversation that really drew on the background and expertise of these 17 people. And so what I love about this particular plaque is it doesn't recreate, it doesn't copy the words of the manifesto. It highlights the people who wrote the manifesto. So when you go to the room, you could say, oh, I know this person, or I heard that person talk. And I really, really, really like this plaque. So you can do that. You can go up to Snowbird and lodge at Snowbird, and now they know about it. It's impacted their life. Very good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to give this is a chance to give all the information I have. So I'm going to do my best to give you guys all the information that I have, what happened up to the meeting that made the meeting the kind of meeting it was, or what happened in the meeting that made it interesting and made it the meeting this was. And the shortest part is going to be anything that came after, because many people, have knowledge about what happened. So what happened was there was I don't know, for me, it was 10 years. It was exactly 10 years. And the writing of the manifesto was a summary of those 10 years. It was a summing up of work that we had all been doing in the 90s, different people, different lengths of time, but all in the 90s. And then for us, it was an inflection point in it, and it changed a little bit the way we worked, but maybe not too much. Whereas for everybody else, it was the starting point, and you can't see what was happening in the 90s such that we produce these words. And so I'd like to get you some image of what was happening in the 90s, such that we produce these words as maybe my major contribution to the conference and to the viewers today. I want to highlight there were 3 threads that came together here, and most people don't know about these 3 threads. I like to use the word there was a network of conversations. There were communities of conversations. And what happens is people meet in this community and they talk and they build some social practice, they get some ideas. Then some subset of those move to a different community and they bring those ideas, and that community changes those ideas. So we had 3 communities of conversations that were happening in the 90s. Now, in my case, my journey started in 1991. I was hired in 1991 by the IBM Consulting Group. I was living in Switzerland, and they hired me to create a process and methodology for Smalltalk and C++ projects at the time. Java wasn't around yet, and so that was what we were looking at. So in 1991, they had a very nice methodology already in place that had incremental development, iterative, it had client focus, it had all of these things. And they just needed to add the Smalltalk part and the C++ part. But I didn't know anything about methodologies. I read all the books that were available at that time, the Ivar Jakobsen book, the Rumbaugh book. And significantly, I read the book by Rebecca Wirfsbrock, because when you ask why weren't there women at the meeting, she should have been there. That was a significant omission, and I'll cover that. But her book, Designing Object-Oriented Software, was already out, and that was my main go-to touchstone for how to construct a methodology and process for object-oriented projects. We were basically, in a sense, if you go back even further, you know, the Smalltalk got released to the world, I think in 1980. Ward Cunningham, Tektronix at the time, and then joined by Kent Beck, just were experimenting with Smalltalk. And very much of what we do in the Agile world these days is basically trying to copy what Kent and Ward did in the 1980s when they were doing their just 2 people working together stuff. And they wrote about it, responsibility-based design, in like I think 1988 OOPSLA conference, and I saw that, and that was a reference for me. Rebecca Wirfsbrock was a reference for me. So those are in my background. So, but anyway, I said to my boss, I've got all these books and they all disagree, and I don't know enough about methodology to know which one we should use. And she said the famous phrase, she gave me this phrase, she said, we don't have any competing methodologies. All we need is something that works. How about that you go and debrief, interview successful project teams around the world and find out what they do and just tell us what they do. And so started, really my career started at that moment. And for the next 2 years, I flew literally all over the world. I went to New Zealand, I went to Canada, I went to Sweden, all over the US, interviewing teams to find out what it is that worked. So this is known, and I later got my PhD in this. It's called Ethnographic Grounded Research, and you study what people do and you try to capture what it is they do. So pretty much all of the stuff that I recommend comes from these project interviews, and I collected stories and so on. So that started in 91. And I found very quickly that if you interview failed projects, there are more ways to fail than you can shake a stick at, that you can imagine. And that was, I wasn't learning anything from interviewing failed projects. So I restricted myself to 2 questions. I had to answer 2 questions. One, did the project deliver? You know, I don't on time on, but I was happy if the project got delivered at all, I was happy. So I said, did the project deliver? And this one turned out to be a trick question. I didn't intend it to be a trick question. Would the people be willing to work the same way again? And I can't tell you the number of people who said, Alistair, come and interview our project, you know, la, la, la. And I said, and would the people be willing to work the same way again? And they go, oh, well, maybe don't interview us. And I thought, what's the point here? If the people aren't willing to work the same way again, why would I want to write that methodology down? So it's not just that a project had a success, but the people would be willing to work. Not happy to, even just willing to, was a hard question. So I did this, I started interviewing these projects, and I got lots of stories, and I live from those stories to this day, to this very day. But what happened, what I saw was that what they did wasn't written in any of the books. Like the books didn't talk about it, and they couldn't talk about what it was they were doing. There was no language at the time. You know, basically it was really what I captured in crystal clear is I wrote down what these people did. And it's stupidly simple. It's called like this, right? Typically small project, 3 to 8 people, put them in a room, give them access to customers to ask questions, have them deliver software, get feedback, leave them alone, and you're done. That's it. You know, every month they would get together and talk about what to change. So that's all there was. And, you know, as a methodologist, it's really hard to make a story out of that. We asked, are you using, you know, computer-aided software engineering tools? No. What kind of tools are you using? What kind of processes? No. We talk to each other. We talk to the customer. We get feedback. That's the end. And so that was in 1992, 93, already the shape. So I wrote that in the methodology, and nobody could understand what I was saying because it didn't have any content. The only technical element was, you know, literally configuration management, versioning, and testing, and not even automated testing at that time. So that was like 91, 92, 93. I'm collecting all of this. And then in 94, 95, we had a fixed price, fixed scope, fixed everything project. And so when people say Agile can't work in a fixed price context, I go, of course it can. You're just happy the requirements don't change. Actually, life is simpler if you have a fixed price contract. So we had like a 20-person, we had a total of about 40 people on the project. So I called that Crystal Orange. We had 12 small talk programmers, which was a lot in 94. We had 3-month deliveries. We didn't use time boxes. That's very significant. That we didn't use sprints or time boxes or that. We had fluid iteration periods, but we just had a lot of customer conversation and feedback points and the delivery every 3 months. We did not have automated testing. We had a lot of bugs in the system. But in fact, the project was one of the very few projects that came in at that time frame, 94, 95, that came in on time, a little over budget, and it was still being used 10 years later. So that counts as a successful industrial project, 94, 95, using the family, I call it a methodology family, Crystal, but it has the fewest rules you could possibly do. It's mostly like put the brains together, let them talk to the customers, ship software, get feedback, and you're kind of done. So we call it Crystal Orange because of the size. So I'm telling you this, that's my personal, so in the understanding of the trajectory, the 3 conversations that I'm going to get around, you know, to outlining, my particular personal journey was grounded research, grounded ethnographic research, and everything came from there. So there was no looking, I would say my inspirations, the people that I used as a touchstone for delivering successful projects in the early 90s, Rebecca Wiersbrock, Ward Cunningham, Kent Beck. That's pre-XP, but those were the people that when you wanted to find successful projects, you would look to these 3 people for having done it and having written about it. So that takes me up to like, that's my journey in terms of constructing the basis for everything. And then what happened after that, after 95, I wrote my first book in 97. I was working for the Central Bank of Norway, and we had lots of different kinds of projects. And I could see that there was no one methodology that would fit for all of the different kinds of projects they had. And there was another fundamental touchstone I had, which is that every project team, every project must have its own methodology. There is not even possibly one methodology that fits all projects. And that influence, I constructed the Crystal family of methodologies. You can't have one. And this shows up in the meeting because Jim Highsmith was coming to the same conclusion. And at the meeting in Snowbird, this little trivia bit will come out to be important. So now I've introduced Ward Cunningham, Kent Beck, and Rebecca Wiersbrock. So I want to get into the three communities of conversation. And it was started around 92, 93. this idea of patterns, and this came from Christopher Alexander, and I don't know who started it, but Jim Copleen was at the center of that. The people at the University of Illinois, Atherton, had interest in this, started writing this, like, what are the patterns for software design themselves? And so Jim Copleen, and I'm going to forget names because I'm bad with names, but Ward Cunningham, in particular, as people who show up again, got very active in creating patterns for software. I was interested in patterns for project management, not for software architecture. So the thing is this, that this patterns group started in 93, 94. There was a Europe version. So there was a strong community having dialogues around how do you design? What are the design structures? What are the project management structures? Patterns for pretty much anything. And over the period of the 90s, there were certain social conventions that came into play that were useful at the moment of the manifesto. So at the time of the writing of the manifesto, we had Martin Fowler. He was core in the patterns community. We had Ward Cunningham, we had Kent Beck, we had me. So we had at least 4 people who came from that community and brought all of that tone and style of conversation that we had practiced for all of those years, 6, 7, 8 years, into the manifesto meeting. So there's a strong overlap there. The second thing that's super important was in 93, I wasn't involved quite then. I got involved in 94. A guy called John Hopkins, Jon Hopkins, Hopkins, and we like to shout out to John every time because he very self-effacing, very quiet guy who doesn't get the credit that he deserves. He created the thing that was the basis for the structure of the Agile Manifesto meeting, workshop on object-oriented design. That's what he called it, WOOD. And now this is significant. John was a skier, and he knew better than I did for sure, that the second week of February, this exact week, the second week of February is the best week for skiing at Snowbird and Alta. And it's exactly like right now, it's snowed in on the mountain, and it was clear on a Wednesday when up there. And on Friday when I came down, we were driving through a snowstorm. So literally, like, this week every year is a major snow dump. So they're snowed in up there, and I'm down at the bottom right now. So what he did was he had a tremendous invitation list. When I went there, I kind of gate crashed in 94. I asked Ward if it would be okay if I came in, because I was living at the bottom of the canyon at the time, and he said, sure. So I went, and John had amazing people. He had Ivar Jakobsen, Ivar's daughter Agneta. We had Adele Goldberg and Kenny Rubin from the Smalltalk community. We had Ward Cunningham. We had Kent Beck, Norm Kurth. We had Larry Constantine, Lucy Lockwood, Jim Rumbaugh. We had the name of names there in the room in 94. Martin Fowler, I think, came the year after in 95. And since they were skiers, he set it up so it was morning conversation, like 8 to 12 or something like that, and then lunch, and then afternoon half-day skiing started at 1 or something like that. So 1 to 4:30, we'd go skiing, and then we continue the conversations, of course, on the chairlift. You have this lovely little private rooms with 2 people in it, or 3 at the most, and you have a little conversation. So it was wonderful for mixing up the dialogue on the chairlifts, and then coming down, and there'd be an evening session, and then you regroup. And we did that for a couple of days. This is very significant because he held that one in 93, 94, 95. Then he stopped. I was in Norway in 97, 98, working for the central bank. And I said, it's time to do another one. And XP was just coming out. So I arranged that we did one of these wood workshops on what's called, any Norwegians here will recognize, the Hurtigrute is the mail ship that runs down the fjords of Norway. And they had built, a conference center and a kind of a bit of a luxury thing there. So we gave lectures in Norway, earned some money, and then flew the people up. And that was in 98. And we had Jim Copleen, we had Ward Cunningham, we had Rebecca Wiersbrock, we had, and I'm trying to remember, Trygve Reinskau, the Norwegian guy. So we had, and you notice the same names keep showing up. And this is my point. So we had the pattern communities represented. We had the wood communities represented each of these years. And then in 2000, in November of 2000, I was going, well, it's time to do another one. It's been a couple of years. It'll have to be the second week of February at Snowbird with the skiing. You know, you get the whole picture now. And as I was about to, send out, and I was building my invitation list, a note came in from Bob Martin saying, hey guys, it seems to me a bunch of us in the lightweight process category, which is the third thread I have to get to in just a second here, are sounding alike. And I think there's something deeper underlying. I think there's something common here, and I want to write a manifesto. So, and he was proposing Chicago in February. And if any of you know anything about Chicago in February, is you don't want to be there. The winds off the lake are freezing cold. It's a terrible place to be. So I said, wow, his topic is better than my topic. His invitation list is better than my invitation list. And I threw in with him, and we had this discussion just the other day, and he said, Alistair, you were the fastest to respond. Like literally I sent out that email, and the next day you said, I'm in, I'll organize it. We'll do it at Snowbird. Like, let's go. And he's going like, wow. But he didn't realize that, there was already going to be one of these workshop on object-oriented design. So I promised you the third thread, and the third thread is the methodology thread, right? The lightweight methodologies, because what was represented in the room, we had extreme programming, which was the big dog at the time. It owned the world, quite frankly. XP did. Scrum, we had DSDM, which came from Europe. We had FDD, which came from Australia. We had Jim Highsmith's stuff, adaptive software development. We had Mike Crystal family was there. And fairly recent, the pragmatic programmers had written sort of a no methodology approach. And so they were there, and Brian Merrick was there representing himself at the time. We had like 6 people from XP, 3 people from Scrum, and then we had, representatives of each of the other ones. But if we just back up, so my Crystal stuff, started 92, 93. I was writing it down. It wasn't called Crystal. It was buried in IBM stuff. Ken Schwaber, Jeff Sutherland wrote their famous first Scrum paper in like 94. Jim Highsmith was studying at Nike and trying to capture how they were doing it. And he was using complex adaptive systems as his theoretical model. So he wrote a book called Adaptive Software Development. In 94, 95, 96, I don't know the exact date, this DSDM community, DSDM stands for Dynamic Systems Development Method. That's not important. But largely in England and in Holland, came up with an absolutely brilliant set of 9 principles that, quite frankly, when I read them, I didn't know them. I had heard the word, but I didn't know them when we were up in Snowbird. And when I came down the mountain and did some research and I read them, I went, we could have taken those things whole cloth without a change. So DSDM was already there. They had all the business involvement, feedback. One of my favorite phrases is sufficient to business purpose. So not perfection necessarily, but you needed things sufficient to business purpose, and you had to have business involved. They had it all in there. So that was there. FDD was a sort of a architect-centric thing that had been done in Australia, written up. The point is that all of these approaches and methodologies had been road tested in the mid-90s. You could find projects from 93, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 using them. So they were all, so none of this was speculative. Here's the point, none of this was speculative. And we were all out talking about it, right? The Scrum guys, the XP guys, FDD, all of us, we were all talking about our stuff. And so, and we'd had like a 4-year run of that. So it was not inappropriate for Bob Martin to say, hey, a bunch of us out there talking about this other way of working, and I think there's something in common there. So that's what I'm going to say. That's all I'm going to say. But I think the preamble, and I'm Toby and whoever else is moderating, this would be maybe a good moment. If there's been questions from the audience, if we do the because I'm going to shift over to the running of the meeting. Did we have any questions? And the giant question everybody has is, why weren't there any women there? I'll pick up when we do the meeting because it's relevant in the outcome of the meeting and the way the meeting ran. But I do keep saying Rebecca Whipsprock's name because she should have been here. But anyway.
Yeah. So no questions yet, Alistair. No
Right.
questions yet. We will.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. So anyway, so we had a kind of a bake-off between Chicago in February and Snowbird in February. And Jim Highsmith and I were both here, so we kind of said we really like Snowbird. We put a little weight on that. So we had to be Snowbird, and I said I'll organize it. And I also have to give a shout out to Cutter Consortium because Jim Highsmith had just started working for them. And they only sponsored the drinks the night before, but they need to get mentioned in the history because they did in fact sponsor the drinks the night before. So we all go up to Snowbird, and so about the invitation list was interesting because I had what I would call the usual suspects, you know, the people from the patterns community and the wood workshops and the people I knew basically, and Rebecca Whipsprock was of course in there. Bob Martin's invitation list looked very strange to me. It was like his show, so I didn't interfere with it. But he had like, you know, Stephen Mellor and Grady Booch and Tom DeMarco, nice people, but they weren't in the conversations around lightweight processes at the time. So I was mystified, like why we're there, and that becomes relevant in a split second. So I just said sure. And the omissions, no, I'm going to still go do that one a little bit later. Good. So we got up there, we have the party the night before, but we set up exactly like with the workshop with wood workshops. Now here's where it gets interesting because we have 17 people, a lot of pundits, well-published people. There was no shortage of ego in the room, right? There was no shortage of self-confidence. And the thing that normally happens that I was fully expecting is what I call cat scratching. It was right when you start at the beginning, you have to create an agenda. And the creating of the agenda, people typically like scratch, fight for dominance. My idea is better than yours. None of that happened. And this was the deep mystery that perplexed me literally for years is to what was it that made the conversation so good? Because it was really a very rich, amicable conversation. And I use the term generous listening. There was enormous generous listening in the room. And I'll show you how generous the listening room was a guy who showed up as Stephen Mellor. Now Stephen Mellor is, I think, Australian, and he's the co-author with Sally Schleyer with the Schleyer-Mellor method. And it's very document heavy. So those of us, you know, in the XP Crystal camp, we hated the Schleyer-Mellor method. Like he was the enemy. And we get there and Stephen Mellor shows up. You know, we're all like big eyes, like what's Stephen Mellor doing here? How are we going to have a meeting, you know, amongst friends with Stephen Mellor here? And he has the most wonderful sort of self-deprecating, slightly cynical speaking style. And it was his turn. He had to introduce himself. He says, I'm Stephen Mellor and I'm a spy. And we all went like, he called it out. Now what are we going to do? But this is the thing that was magic, was nobody rejected him at that moment. This was the generous listening that still has me scratching my head. Everybody assumed that everybody else was there for a reason, knew what they were doing, and had valuable content. And all of our dialogues were around what's the intention behind that? What's behind that could be interesting? How do we go forward from there? There was no banging, right? So he did that. That's the level of listening. And there was one point to stay on the Stephen Mellor thing, and I got to actually share this with him just a couple of days ago when we were on a broadcast together. I remember a moment where Ron Jeffries and I are talking to Stephen Mellor, and Stephen had like documents and diagrams and diagrams and there were like 17 different diagrams before you got the code. And so we're talking to him and go like, what's that all about? And he says, well, I want that you should be able to program using diagrams and text, right? And Ron goes, yeah, but you know, that does you no good because you push a button, you generate the code, then you have to maintain the code in the code, and then the diagrams are out of date. So like, we're not going to use that. And Stephen goes, no. My intention is that you maintain it in the diagrams. I'm working on trying to make it, you know, expressive enough that you would never go to whatever C++, you would remain in the diagramming forever. And Ron and I go, so the new source code programming languages, diagrams plus code? And he goes, yes. We go, fine by us. Like, we literally don't care what the programming syntax is. What we care is we can do our maintenance work in that. And he goes, yeah, that's what I intend. And boom, and now here, this is funny because this was just 2 days ago. We were literally talking about this. And I said, and at that moment, Stephen came around to our side of the table and we were just like one group. And Stephen said, no, you all came to my side of the table. And then I realized that no, the light just shone that we were all in the same place and we just hadn't realized it. So that's the kind of non-aggressive dialogue that was there, that made it magical. And everybody who was there says that was the best meeting, that was the most magical meeting. All right, so I've spent, like a half an hour on the history and setting up. And you can ask questions, people, if there's something I left out, I'm happy to pick them up with time at the end. And the next thing I want to do and kind of get on the record is my personal recollections of the meeting. My memory is faulty. I've tried to remember it. There's things that I've forgotten, other people remember. But I'll do the bits that struck me about the meeting, because there was a very interesting, if we have this generous listening, we have the habits from XP, we have the habits from the pattern communities showing up here. So we get together and Bob Martin stands up and says, like 5 minutes, this stuff, I think that we have something in common. I'd like to write a manifesto. By the way, I thought it was kind of stupid to write a manifesto. I don't like manifestos. I was wrong, he was right. So never ask me any questions about the future, because I'm useless at saying anything about the future, obviously. But anyway, so he sits down and we're sitting in a circle, 17 people. And somebody says, so how do we build an agenda? And then somebody, and it would be one of the XP crowd, right? Because the extreme programming people, they always carried index cards in their pockets in those days, CRC cards. They had a phrase. They always said, write it on a card. So one of the XP people picks a card out of their pocket and says, just write it on a card. Write something on a card and flicks it into the center of the circle. So then the other 5, because there were 6 XP people, right? So then the other XP people all pull index cards out of their pockets and start writing. And then the non-XP people, for whom this would have been new, just go, can I have a card? I said, get a card. So then we all write down ideas for the agenda. We throw them on the floor, and there's a big pile of stuff on the floor. And somebody says, how do we turn that into an agenda? And so somebody says, well, anybody who cares about the agenda stays and builds an agenda, and anybody else takes a coffee break. So I don't care about the agenda. So I took a coffee break and I came back and stuff was all on the wall, stuck to the wall. And so we started working through the agenda. And relevant here, again, to get the tone of the conversation that was so unusual, sometime later, I don't know, 5 minutes, 30 minutes later, somebody goes, I have an item I'd like to put on the agenda. How do I put it on the agenda? And somebody else says, let's put it on the agenda. And I remember his eyes were kind of big, like, I can do that? Really? And so he got up, and to this day, I have no idea, what he put on the agenda or where he put it on the agenda. But you see, this is that I have to keep saying, somebody said, because it was so fluid that we literally don't remember who said various things, and it didn't matter. It was just a fluid discussion that was really interesting between well-respecting peers. So what we did the next thing was, that I do recall, was everybody should introduce themselves and their methodology, and so everybody got 10 minutes. And it was interesting to watch the faces, because Ari van Bennekom, who was the DSDM guy, didn't know anything about extreme programming, and Kent Beck didn't know about anything about DSDM. So Kent gave, a 10-minute synopsis of extreme programming, and Ari was just looking at this like really confused. And then Ari gave a discussion of DSDM, and I was watching Kent, and compared to XP, DSDM looked, kind of heavyweight at the time. Kent just listened, right? So we did all this exchange, and I talked about Crystal, and Jim Highsmith talked about adaptive, and John Kern talked about FDD. We went through all of these things. Then at the end, so Bob goes, I guess those sound pretty, like there ought to be something there. So let's go. So how do we do this? So then we did a name search. And now this is important because what happened in the name search was significant. And I happened to facilitate that. So we took turns facilitating. the different things, and everybody was easy to facilitate. There was no difficulty there. And so I was the facilitator, and I'd flip charts. And so we started off with just brainstorming names, like anybody take any name. And we had 2 or 3 flip charts full of names, 2 columns. I mean, we had a pile of names. I couldn't even tell you. We didn't take photographs. We had no sense of this being historic. So we took these things. And then was the most interesting thing that happened next. Somebody who had known Jerry Weinberg said, Jerry Weinberg suggests that when you're doing this, you should look for the things you don't like about the names. So that was very unusual. So we'd pick a name, and I'd say, we're trying to find what we object to in the name. It's not a vote against the name. We're looking for what we object to. So take a name and say, well, I don't like that because, and I don't like that because, and whatever. We took an hour over this, right? So this wasn't a short thing. And the only thing that strikes me as really funny was the meme came up because 17 men. A lot of these were very light, kind of artsy names. And when somebody said, I don't want to have to wear pink tights and a tutu when I say this word. Like it has to be a strong word. And as we kept putting, words up that would show up over here, I don't want to have to wear pink tights and a tutu when I say this word. So that's, I don't like this word. So we got through with all of that, and we took a dot vote. We took to the top 5, and then from the top 5, we did a bake-off. And here's where the surprise was when we did the bake-off, there was a tie between Agile and Adaptive. And that's really interesting because they were a tie, and we did have to do, we had some more discussion, and Agile eventually, came out the winner. And I think it was a good winner. But adaptive is another good word. And for me personally, I would say that I think of Agile as tracking changing requirements. So a project is Agile because it's tracking changing, situations during the project. A company is adaptive because they're changing the culture over time to match the changing cultural, setting and so on. So I happen to think you need to be both Agile and adaptive. As examples, extreme programming is Agile, but it's not adaptive. At least version 1 that came out, it's not adaptive. It's got a set of rules. Scrum's not very adaptive. It's Agile. Rational unified process, for those of you who are old enough, was adaptive. It was supposed to be tailored for every project, but it wasn't Agile, right? So we want things that are Agile and adaptive. And here's where the thing with Jim Highsmith and me comes in. The group couldn't tell us apart. Like literally, they thought our ideas were so similar, they bunched us together and we split our 10 minutes and so on. But we were sitting there watching the discussions about this and going, we looked to each other and go, I don't need that my methodology is this. What I aspire to is that every methodology that we ever touch is this, has these properties. So there could be many different kinds of Agile methodologies. We don't ever lock onto one, but everything you touch should be have these properties that we're going to talk about. So, okay. So now it's, I don't know where we are at lunch or something, and maybe we go skiing, and so I'm on the ski lift talking to John Kern and James Grenning and Jim Highsmith, and they're talking to each other. And so non-skiers down below when they're having their discussions, and who knows what happens there because I wasn't there. We come back down, and at some point, so somebody says, well, we need more than a word. What's more than a word? And so we said, well, maybe we'll do values. So there was this discussion, and we don't know who, but somebody put this over that stuff, and then everybody recognized this is a great structure. We can live in this because it doesn't badmouth anybody, but it does highlight the differences between, let's say, the Project Management Institute, get back to plan, CMMI, follow the process, rational, unified, just, use all of these tools and so on. And so you'll see the references against processes and tools, documentation, and get back to plan through all the values of the manifesto. So we did that, and what was super interesting, again, in the tone, I'd like to use this time I'm talking about to highlight the tone of the meeting, because that was really special. So we're sitting 17 of us in a half circle around the whiteboard, and we have the this over that, stuff. And so we go, so how does everybody feel about that? That some thumbs are like this and, whatever. And so we wordsmith that word by word, sentence by sentence, phrase by phrase. And we said, what do you feel about that phrase? And if anybody was off top, we didn't look for consensus. We absolutely looked for unanimity. And then the people would say, well, so what bothers you about that? I said, well, that bothers me about that. And then everybody would be, well, how can we change the words to pick that up? So we were really being super inclusive of everybody. And I can tell you the one that I had trouble with was, at that time, they said working software over documentation. And I said, I can't go out in the world and say you can't have documentation. You have to have documentation. So that's a little bit wobbly. We came up with comprehensive documentation. We were trying to indicate over documentation. But that'd be an example where I said, honestly, I can't live with that. I can't sign my name to this if it says you don't need documentation, because that's just wrong. So we did that, and we got all done with that. And maybe that was the end of day one or something. I don't know. And then we go, well, that's nice. We have values, right? We can be different between each other and all adhere to these values. Is there any more you can say? And some said, well, maybe there's some principles behind it. Maybe let's find that. And so we started writing the principles. And now here's where the disagreements started to happen, right? So first of all, Ari van Bennekom had to go back, and the planes, some people getting ready to go on the planes. The attention span wasn't all there. But we really disagreed with each other on the day-to-day. So this is very important. And when we got to the principles, we started to have, it was difficult to get complete alignment. And just to give another example, I like Ward, Ward likes me. And there was this thing about delivering something. And I had a rule that you had to deliver every 3 months. And I didn't realize that the extreme programming people were doing iterations where they maybe gave a demo, but they didn't deliver, and they were doing it at the level of weeks. And I didn't detect, I was talking about deliveries and Ward was talking about, demos and iterations. So we had, deliver every few weeks. And I said, you don't need to deliver every few weeks. You can literally deliver every few months. And Ward looked at me, like I was some strange, heavyweight bureaucratic, salesman kind of a thing. And so he said, would you agree that it would be better if it was shorter? And I go, oh, absolutely, no problem. So that's why that principle says delivering working software every few weeks to every few months with a preference to the former. And that's how that little dialogue happens. I'm showing you how the dialogues happen. Well, we didn't get unanimity and people are flying away. And, then we go, well, let's pick it up by email. And of course, nothing works. You can't get this kind of dialogue happening by email. And some months went by, and then you were getting a little frustrated that we couldn't close it out. And at some point, somebody said, like, whatever you've got, somebody take ownership and put it up, right? So the principles were a little bit, like not unanimous. And then Ward Cunningham did something magical. He said, I'm a domain registrar, and so I'll make a domain for this, and I'll put up just a simple page. But what he did was he put a little thing, a signatory box, like if you want to co-sign this thing, and a little text box where you could write something. And it absolutely blew our socks off, the number of people who wrote in, just hundreds of people writing and saying, I love this. This is exactly the way I want to work. And that's when we realized that there were thousands and thousands of programmers who around the world who were looking for words that captured the way they felt. And we had really, touched the center of something that was really common around the world. So I want to talk to the closing part, and I'll talk to the women part. I'm watching the time a little bit. And I see somebody with a hand up. Did you want to ask a question? Pop in here.
Oh, so this is just me, Nash. Just wanted to mention that there are 4 questions. So if you want to take 1 question or 2 questions right now,
Why
or
don't you read out the 4 questions, and I'll see if I can fold them into the story.
Yeah, sure. That is awesome. The very first question in here is, was the difficulty of converging on principles by email the impetus for the principle about face-to-face conversation?
No, that was core to us. And in fact, I'll just pick that up right now. It was interesting in the closing section. There's 2 questions that we get, but in the closing section, we were looking at the values and the principles and said, this could only have worked by face-to-face. Like literally, there's no way this could have been done other than with using our own values and principles right here in this room. So that was core to all of us. It was absolutely foundational. And the difficulty with the email is just, evidence of it. Yeah. And the other thing I'll pick up right off straight away here is people say, when are you going to update it? And this now gets into the question of the women that I want to pick up. But you've still got your hand up. So let me ask you what the other three questions are, because I won't forget what I'm going to say.
Oh, yeah, sure. I forgot to lower my hand, but I will do it right away. The other question, which I think you just picked it up, it is according to, in line with that. It says, what's one thing you wish had been included in the manifesto session at Snowbird, considering the state of Agile in 2021?
Ooh, the short answer is probably nothing, because we put our whole hearts and souls in there. What's the third question?
That is around, now that we are knee deep in a pandemic, do you think the principles of Agile software still stand? How do they align with our new virtual world that's expected to still collaborate and produce the same results
Yeah,
that we had prior to pandemic?
sure. Yeah, they still stand. That's a short answer. And I'll pick that up probably when I get to the present. Was there a fourth question?
There is one more, which says, do you think Scrum and Kanban have too many rules and not true to the spirit of agility and adaptiveness?
No, they don't have too many rules, and they are in the spirit of agility. So those are nice, easy questions, because I want to get back to the closing session of the meeting, because two things are relevant there. So we're talking about this, and we're saying, first of all, this could not have happened if we didn't exactly have, the face-to-faces that we had, right? All the principles. But the next question was, do we ever update this? And that was interesting discussion. It gives you the thinkers in the room were really, really, really good. And they go, look, this thing is the product of 17 exact people who were in an exact mood, fighting an exact battle against, we were literally begging for permission to deliver software. We were working with the customers. We understood about customer value. We were not allowed to deliver software. We were begging to deliver software. So we really had a war on our hands, right? We were fighting a battle. So the battle that we're fighting, the conversations we have, exactly these 17 people in their current mood and in their current conversations produce these words. And if you were to change one person, everything would be different. The entire conversation would have been different from the beginning. So we said, okay, I guess we have to treat this like a manifesto. You don't update manifestos. They're time-stamped, right? The Declaration of Independence. The Constitution gets updated, but the Declaration of Independence doesn't get updated. So this is us. We have a moment in time. This is what we wrote. It's a fact. We lock it. So when people say, it took 6 months, Jim Highsmith and I were sitting at the table and going this is bigger than just software. I know we wrote software, but you could apply this for all product development. Now, when we get to my current stuff, the heart of Agile, you apply it to every kind of initiative, and Rocio Briseño, who's coming right after me, will talk about applying this to social impact projects where there's not a shred of technology in sight, anywhere. So we say we won't update it. It's a product of these exact 17 people. So let's finally pick up the question of the women or absence of women in the room. There's three parts to that, if I would look at that. The first is, who would we invite? Who was there? And it's a challenge. Gabrielle Benefield and I were on some chat a little while, and I go, name the women who were published in the field of lightweight processes and methodologies in 1999. Who are you going to find? Well, Rebecca Wiersbrock, whose book I read in 1991. So she would have been on my list if I'd been awake. I didn't notice she wasn't on Bob's list. I didn't review that. So oops, mea culpa. I've apologized to her many times. She should have definitely been there. Adele Goldberg wrote with Kenny Rubin the methodology around small talk, but I think that was her exit. She never showed up and talked about it again. It turns out that Jennifer Stapleton, I had met in England, was a DSDM, one of the founders of the DSDM consortium. She was invited, so we invited Agneta Jakobsen, was on Bob Martin's list. Rebecca was lifted off. Adele Goldberg wasn't playing anymore. And we did invite Jennifer Stapleton. She couldn't make it because there wasn't a lot of notice. And so Arif van Benneken came in her place. So we had it, that was the short list. And you could name other people that might have been there, but they weren't published enough to be really obviously on the list. Martine de Vos in Europe and Belgium would be another name that could have been there. But now let's look at two more. Do I have 10 minutes? Toby, I'm thinking I have 10 minutes. Because I'm planning on going for 8.5 minutes more.
Absolutely. Please do.
Okay, good. Because it's just the screen flashed and changed on me. It's now got you there with the celebrating 20 years of Agile. Anyway, so I'll keep going. So the other thing that's interesting is I was thinking about, say when we want, why aren't there women? What, besides the fact that gender diversity wasn't on our minds back in 2001. I was looking for international diversity. I wanted Europe and Australia represented. I wasn't looking at gender diversity. But stereotypically, just it's kind of interesting to think, why would we think that 17 men would be like not a good meeting and you would want women? And it's interesting because, again, we're operating in stereotypes here. You think that women are going to listen better. That's one of the things that they do, is there's a kind of an amicability, a gentleness in the conversation, there's a non-confrontation, there's a quality of listening that typically you think of as missing if you have all men and you bring some women in. And so here it's interesting that the quality of listening was so high that I don't think that would have changed for the presence of any of the 4 women specifically that I mentioned. And the other thing is, well, what impact would it have had? What would it have changed if it had any women? And per our discussion, it would have changed everything. If Rebecca Wirsbrock had been there, it would have been a different conversation. If Jennifer Stapleton had been there, it would have been a different conversation. If Adele Goldberg, if Martine de Vos had been there. If anybody, if Tom DeMarco had made it, it would have been a different, if Grady Booch had made it. So we recognize that swapping any one person would have made the outcome completely different. So those are the women we could have invited, the short list. And we had good listening and the outcome was very specific to like whomever. So I've got like 7 minutes left. I did the part that was significant for me was putting all of that history in my particular perspective. I pick up maybe 2 questions on my own. One is people get annoyed about the certification stuff, right? The industry that's been built around all of this. And what I have to say about that is, if you have an idea, let's just say it's a good idea, people will generally ignore you. And if they don't ignore you, they'll corrupt your idea. So if your idea is successful, it will be co-opted, corrupted, misrepresented, and misused. Like that's a given. That's a sign of success. Anybody who's interested in gaining power will co-opt your idea to increase their power. And the fact that that has happened with Agile is only an indication that it was successful. So I've written 3 other manifestos and nobody knows about them, right? So nobody's corrupted them. I can't complain that they were corrupted, they're ignored. So the world will either corrupt your idea or ignore you, and you don't get to choose. That's what I want to say. The thing I'm going to do with my last minutes is point out what I've done since then. In 2015, I was challenged to make a simplification of Agile, and I'll put up this sticker here to the camera. It has to be in front of my face. Let's see if this works. Damn it. There you go. And I boiled all of Agile down to these 4 words: collaborate, deliver, reflect, improve, and with a little heart in the middle. And people from the olden days are saying even the manifesto was too complicated for 2021 and are introducing Agile using just these 4 words. And it's with these 4 words that we take Agile out of software, out of product. And when Rocio Briceño, talks, she's in many communities, but she's in the heart of Agile community amongst them. We don't talk about products or work products. We talk about decisions. An organization is a brain making decisions, and whatever you deliver to the world is the solidification of those decisions. And with this, if you just collaborate to deliver, you deliver to get feedback, you probe and touch the world to get information. You get feedback and then you reflect on the collaboration and the delivery, and then you make micro improvements to all of them. You get what we need out of the word Agile. You just actually, it's more effective projects and more effective teamwork. And now we can apply this to governments, social projects, families, and Rocio will tell you stories of social projects and government projects and families. And we really were hoping back in 2001 that this would be a completely normal way of working. And one of us said it should come with mother's milk. And we actually have stories of people running their families using these ideas, right? So it does come with mother's milk. It should be taught in kindergarten. It should be the default way of approaching things. And that's pretty much where we are. So 3 minutes left. My people, I was watching the clock. I ended, is there one more question that was interesting enough we want to pick up?
Yeah, there is one question in here which says, which is better, index cards or sticky notes? It got 4 votes.
What a funny question. So I like index cards because they slide on the table, and the techniques I use happen to involve moving things around a lot. So if you do CRC cards, if you do blitz planning, you like the characteristic that they slide, but they don't stick on the wall. So if you're doing planning where things need to stay for days, then you like the sticky notes and they go on the wall. So that's why when you do the planning, the stuff goes on the wall, so or the window, so you can look at it. But if you're doing a dynamic session, then it's fun to have the cards and move them around.
All right. So do you want to revisit the question which said, what's one thing you wish had been included in manifesto? I believe you answered that question.
Yeah.
But
We get burned all the time with the fourth value, responding to change over following a plan. And I'd like to lay this one down because we talked about this. The planning activity is useful because you get a mind meld of the future. You find future roadblocks. So this is interesting. The planning. The plan itself goes out of date within a week or two. So you can't, so actually if you're going to play the Agile game, you have to plan more often. You have to get good at planning. So we wrote responding to change over following a plan. And I call that paying attention to current reality. Current reality is stock market crashed, your lead programmer quit, whatever that might be. And then you may still have the same goal or you may change the goal. And the way we wrote that was responding to change over following a plan. And people go, well, that Agile means I don't have to plan. And it's just wrong with a capital R. Wrong. That's what I have to say. So the planning is useful. Plan goes out of date. Pay attention to current reality. Yeah. And by the way, why can't I remember his name? The Swedish guy from CRISP. I'm going to embarrass myself by forgetting his name right this very minute. Change 2 words in the manifesto to take it out of software. Instead of saying working software, he says working value or delivering value. Working value. And instead of responding to change, it says responding to feedback. And if you put in the word value and feedback in those 2 spots, the manifesto works for everything. Good. I'm cool. We do still have a minute on the clock. If there's any closing.
Yeah, there is one real question. I will finish that, and that's the last question. I think there are 2 more, but let's see if we can finish that. It says, what are your thoughts of how Agile is practiced today?
The universe is so different now than it was in the mid 90s. We were a small co-located, we were like 3 people, 8 people, 12 people, co-located, non-mission critical, non-life critical projects, right? Now we have 100 people, 100 people, thousands of people distributed around the world, talking over their microphones and stuff, mission critical, life critical, right? Everything's different. We have continuous, all of that, but the principles and values stay. That's the cool part. And apropos COVID and the video, I've done a lot of research and plus a lot of experience. It's always better if you're in the same room. I'm sorry, it's just better if you're in the same room. And we suffer with the video, and we use technology exactly as we're doing right now. We use technology to try to capture those facial movements, the little finger movements, all the little stuff that communicates mood and intention. We use technology to climb up the curve to approach being present. And that's what we're doing right now. And it's what we're doing in COVID. They have the thing called a double that's like it's like an iPad on a Segway, and somebody remote can drive it around the office, camera of it, right? So it's like having a person there. We're using technology to approximate being literally there. Yep.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alistair. You filled our cups. So much information, so much history, nuggets, your personal anecdotes, so many things that personally I didn't know about, and I'm sure a lot of our viewers didn't know about. So thank you so much. We are really, really fortunate to have you share all these on the very day the manifesto was actually signed. So we're very lucky and we lucked out. We really learned so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you on behalf of everyone who are attending and also the organizers and sponsors of 820. All right, everyone. So this session is over. The keynote is over. We have so much more in store for you today. Right after this, in 15 minutes after a break, we have Rocio Briceño, who's going to talk about social impact of Agile. We have Jim York, who's going to talk about an increment is born. And then we have Emergence, the Past and Future of Agile by Matthias Effort. During lunch, we have quite a few sessions. Then we have Linda Rising, who's going to do the afternoon keynote. We have more concurrent sessions after that. We have a social hour. And then George Dinwiddie has an incredible session towards the end as well. So a whole lot happening. Stay with us. Stay till the raffle. And we're going to party at the social hour. Once again, happy birthday, Agile Manifesto. Thank you, Alistair. We will see you in 15 minutes. Thank you, everybody.
All right, gang.
Thank you so
Right. Thank you so much, Alistair. That was great.
Well, I was happy to get all of that on the record. You know, I've been telling that stuff unofficially, and now, and it was fun 2 days ago on Thursday. They got, I think, a total of 7 people on at the same time. So we got to ask each other. I got to ask a couple of questions. I told Stephen Mellor the bit about the Ron Jeffries and him and me. And I asked Bob Martin, why did you want to write a manifesto? Where did that come from? And I didn't talk about this one here, but he said that, again, the patterns community and the XP community were very close. And he had been at some event that Kent Beck had organized with Martin Fowler. And then Martin Fowler was in Chicago. So Martin Fowler and Bob Martin were having a chat and said, we should find something like, I don't know. The XP guys were talking about should they build a global organization, and they voted against it. And the aftermath of that was Bob Martin and Martin Fowler. You want me to stop?
Well, yeah, just mentioning that I think the feed is still live. We have to kill the feed and we have to open another session for Rocio, which is going to be exactly in the same place.
As long as we weren't broadcasting, then that's fine. Anyway, he just said he didn't like the word manifesto, and throw it out there. All right, you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Awesome.
Nash, are we going to start Rocio's session? She's been waiting there.
Yes, I'm going to do that.
Let
Let me kill this quickly.
Perfect.
Doing
See you
it.
later.